Now this room is actually supported by 1 million invisible processes. So for example, while you're sitting in here, you don't have to worry about whether it's raining because there's a roof, and you don't have to worry about whether the roof is going to fall in because you make the presumption that the people who built the roof are competent. And the electricity works because the utility is run by people who are competent, so it's almost always on. Buildings hardly ever burn down. The electricity hardly ever fluctuates. There's thousands of people out there working as hard as they can diligently to make this environment constant enough so that you can ignore all the thousands of things that you're ignoring, so that you can concentrate well enough to attend to the few things that you are attending to while you're in this room. You're in a walled city. There's multiple walls, and those walls protect you from what's outside the walls. You can think about it this way. This is a Taoist image of reality. Now, people think about this as a metaphysical symbol. But it's not a metaphysical symbol. It's an unbelievably practical symbol. The Taoists believe that the world, the reality, is made up essentially of chaos and order. Chaos is all those things you don't understand. So I would say that chaos is all those things that exist outside of your perceptual preconditions. Order is all the things you do understand and all the places you go where the things that you do produce the results that you intend. And the Taoists would say, everywhere you go is like that. Everywhere you go has things that you understand that are orderly and has things that you don't understand that are chaotic. And the chaotic things attract your attention because you already understand the orderly things. If something unexpected happens, your nervous system automatically reacts to it and orients you towards it. And sometimes that can be catastrophic. So this is an experience that some of you will have in the next 4 years. Undoubtedly, there's a number of you that want to go to medical school, or to graduate school, or to law school, or to business school. And a certain percentage of you will take the admission tests that will determine whether or not you're able to take that path. And a certain percentage of you will score below the 50th percentile on those tests. And that will mean you will not be going to those institutions. And when that happens, first of all, you'll shake and tremble when you open the envelope to find out your results. And second, if you haven't achieved the score that you expected that you achieve, your world will fall apart. And what that'll mean is that you descend from the domain of order into the domain of chaos. And that happens to people all the time. It happens to people when they develop an illness that's serious that they can't control, because then their body stops becoming something they can predict and starts to become something that they can't predict. It happens to people when they're in an intimate relationship and they're betrayed. They assume fidelity and the person tells them that they've had an affair. That's chaos. That means you didn't know who that person was. The future you imagine no longer exists. Your perceptions of people are erroneous at some level of analysis that you don't understand. It's conceivable that you're naive beyond belief and that everything you believed about yourself and other people up to that point is false. And when a revelation occurs that knocks out one of the walls that supports you and you descend accidentally into chaos, you'll regard that as one of the worst experiences of your life. When that happens to you, your brain knows exactly what to do. It stops thinking about the future. It stops saving up resources for the future. It puts you in emergency preparation mode so that you're ready to do anything at the drop of a hat because you don't know what to do. So your body prepares to do everything. It shifts your cortisol levels up. It activates your left and right cortices. Your limbic system and your motivational systems are disinhibited, turned on, and you sweat and you can't sleep because the orderly structure that you thought you inhabited that provided you with security and direction has now disappeared. And the Taoists believe that the world is always an interplay between chaos and order, and that if you live your life properly, you stand with one foot in order and one foot in chaos. Because if you're only in order, nothing that's interesting ever happens to you. Nothing is anything but a repeat of all the things that you already know. That's the state that fascists desire. Because fascists desire things to be exactly the way they are forever. And if you're in a state that's only characterized by chaos, you're at sea or overwhelmed or things have fallen apart for you. And there's too much of everything for you to deal with. Now the Taoists, being very wise people, know other things as well. They know, for example, that chaos can turn into order. That's why there's a white dot in the middle of the black paisley. And they know that order can turn into chaos, which is why there's a black dot in the middle of the white paisley. And the Taoists believe that A meaningful life, the optimally meaningful life, is to be found on the border between chaos and order. And I would say that your nervous system tells you exactly when you are there, and it's a kind of place. And you can tell when you're there because you're secure enough to be confident, but not so secure that you're bored. And you're interested enough to be awake, but not so interested that you're terrified. And when you're in a state like that, when you find things interesting and meaningful, time slips by you and you're no longer self-conscious. This is a very old image. The oldest story we know, which is a Mesopotamian creation myth, features a god who confronts a reptilian monster and makes the world as a consequence of the conflict. He faces her, she's terrifying, he cuts her up into pieces, and out of the pieces he makes the world. Now the Mesopotamians, 5,000 years ago, were trying to figure out what the nature of individuality was and what the nature of consciousness was. And their presupposition, which was dramatized, because these people told stories, they didn't think the way we think in explicit, philosophical, logical, with philosophical processes. They thought in stories, which is a natural way for people to think. They came to the conclusion that the object of their ultimate worship was the God who confronted the dragon of chaos, cut it into pieces, and made the world. And that idea has echoed down through the ages. It's an idea that human beings have never lost. Now, this idea is very interesting. So, you see the castle in the background, and we already know what the castle stands for. The castle stands for order. And it's a multi-walled castle because everyone's protected by multiple walls. But those walls are constantly breached. Now, young people, especially modern young people, are often very cynical about the traditions that they inhabit. They're cynical about them because they see the fact that the world is theoretically devolving into some kind of environmental catastrophe. And they're cynical because there's still war and because there's still hunger. They're cynical because often the people who are teaching them the traditions don't seem to believe in them themselves. And it's very easy for young people to look at the traditions that were and to notice the breaks. But the truth of the matter is that throughout human history, tradition has always been anachronistic and out of date. And what you see in images of St. George and the dragon is that the dragon's always breached the walls, which means that tradition is always under attack from chaos. Well, of course it is, because the future is different than the past. But that doesn't mean that the past should be abandoned, because if you abandon the past and you knock down all your walls, you fall into a pit of chaos. And that, classically speaking, is indistinguishable from hell. And I can tell you that if you spend long enough in that state, you'll become bitter and cruel, because that's what happens to people who suffer endlessly. St. George is a different kind of individual. When the walls come crumbling down, as they always do, he decides to go out and to confront the dragon. Now, dragons are very strange creatures, as you may have already noted. First of all, they don't exist. Second of all, they have very weird propensities. So, for example, they hoard gold, and they tend to trap virgins in their lair, which you will also admit is very strange behavior for a reptile. Now, the idea behind this is that it's a very, very complicated idea, and it's all presented pictorially. The idea is that the thing that lurks underneath, if you look to the right of the picture, you can see that there's a cave. The cave goes way down into the ground, and way down into the ground is the terrifying place that's underneath everything. The dragon crawls out from time to time to threaten the structure of everything that's known. St. George comes out to confront the dragon voluntarily, overcomes it, and in this image, rescues the virgin that the dragon has been guarding. It's a very complicated story. It means that the things that terrify you contain things of value. That's also what the image of the gold that the dragon hoards represents. It means something else as well. It means that the individual man who's likely to go out and confront chaos when tradition is crumbling is more likely to find a mate